I will just stick to one particular type of microscopic description of swarming. What is actually what I'm doing all the time, and this is the active quantum particle approach. I will come into detail in a second. And then I try to derive some macroscopic equations out of the microscopic equations. Active quantum particles, if you have swarming, and I gave a talk 4 years ago right at this audience right here, are a very effective tool to describe swarming systems, because you actually have like 3 ingredients you need to describe a swarm. First of all, in a swarm the particles move permanently, so you need some term in your theory which describes that they take up energy out of the environment. Or they store that in an energy depot, and out of that depot then they can use this energy. So if I'm a physicist, so I start always with the Newtonian equation. This is the only equation we actually can handle. And all the rest is just a complication of everything. So we need to look at the forces on every particle in order to describe its motion. So one force makes them move permanently. This is the depot force. Then in a swarm, of course, they interact. So we have to describe somehow the interaction. So there's an interaction force. And then these are individuals. So they do crazy motions. Not crazy in the term that they are crazy, but if you sit right here and this guy moves to some extent, you cannot analyze why does he do it. That's what I mean with crazy. And this all we put in the fluctuation forces. So there are some motions, some forces which act on every individual, which cannot be described deterministically. So these are the 3 main ingredients to my knowledge, or in my opinion. So so we have a friction term, we have a confinement term, and we have random forces. And now I can make it more complicated. I write down these equations, but at this conference everybody probably knows it. And I will go into detail. What is this? How do I have to model this friction term, which is depending nonlinearly on the velocity? So these are 2 possible examples to describe nonlinear friction, which leads to a permanent motion of the particles. Actually, this can be reached out of this, but more biologically motivated. Forgive me. More biologically motivated formula. So you make a Taylor series of that, then you end up with this, and these parameters just end up in these 2 parameters. Gamma, the friction, depending on the velocity, has this shape. And you see, for small velocities, this friction function leads to a pumping, to an acceleration of the particles, and if they're too fast, then it will damp out. So they finally end up with a stationary velocity. So we have in the stationary case, which is still non-equilibrium, I will show you that in a second, a stationary velocity. And if we are in the stationary case, then you can believe me, this function can be approximated by this function. So all the rest of the talk, I will use this function right here. So instead of a nonlinear pumping, what is right here the case, we stick to nonlinear friction, but they relate one to another. If we have this equation right here, I call a Langevin equation. Out of this Langevin equation, I can write down this Fokker-Planck equation right here. And then, if I take into account the Rayleigh model of a nonlinear friction, then we see, so this is now the energy input parameter, how much energy they take up out of the environment. And if this is a negative number, what means they don't take any energy out of their environment, then in the stationary case, that means if nothing changes anymore in the system, I can write down the solution of the Fokker-Planck equation, and it ends up in the formula like this. And so this is the homogeneous solution of the Fokker-Planck equation. So I don't take into account right now any interaction. And you see that the mean velocity of these particles is 0, and we have a Maxwellian distribution. And so this is like the equilibrium case. So we are in equilibrium then. But if I now change this parameter gamma 1, and I really do take up energy out of the environment as a single particle, then you see that the stationary solution looks completely different. I have a bifurcation within the velocity space. So and now the mean velocity is still 0, but the most probable one is not 0. And this is a real, this is a stationary non-equilibrium. So all the equilibrium approximations I would like to do in order to have a macroscopic theory will fail. This is because of this stationary velocity distribution. And just to show you, for the depot model, it's just the same. My bifurcation parameter now is the conversion rate. If they convert very effectively, they will, and they can move permanently. If they convert not very effectively, then they will just move randomly. So now let me show you some results with microscopic simulations with different interaction types. So if we think that the particles just attract each other, and we neglect the alignment forces for just to be able to describe it, then we find two modes of motion. We have a translational mode, what means the swarm. This is my interaction force right here. I just assume springs. So we have a directed moving swarm. And another, for different system parameters, I have rotational modes. And the question occurs, what could be the parameter which leads to that transition between the two modes? We found out that if I increase the fluctuating forces, this leads to this transition. Or if you take chemical interacting particles which move on a fluid-like surface, so they have two types of interactions. They have a velocity coupling mode, what is Wishek-like or fluid, like hydrodynamic-like interaction. And this is just a fixed strength of the velocity coupling. And you see you have rotating state. And now we increase the velocity coupling, we keep everything else fixed. So just a little increase of the velocity coupling, and you see the rotating mode. It starts within the rotating mode, but it is already a little bit disturbed because the alignment forces are way too large. And if I increase this any further, you see a directed moving swarm. What we do right here, we try to describe bacteria on the surface with this simulations. So you have different types of transition parameters. You either take the ratio, in this case, of chemical interaction and fluid-like interaction, or you have the stochastic forces as the bifurcation as the parameter of transition. So these are the results we had with the microscopic equations. We found these results just by looking at all the parameters. So that is why we try to describe now, we derive macroscopic equations.